It's an odd feeling to come back after being gone for a week and not preaching the last 2 Sundays. I find myself scrambling to find some of the typical things that I'm looking for. My singing bowl this morning was missing, and I had to search for that. And I tell you, sometimes when the world can seem disorienting, it is really good to know that there are people out here who love and support you and to get you back on the right track. I love how the text from the Gospel of Matthew ends this morning, where 2 or more gathered, there I am also. And I find that to be extremely true for me in the past week, and I hope that you are finding ways that you are feeling connected and grounded to people around you who can help support you and guide you in all of your days. One of the places where I go to find lots of people and find lots of support is the internet. For better or for worse, there are some wonderful things you can do on social media. How many of us are connected on Facebook? If you're on Facebook, okay. Maybe a majority of the congregation there. There's a portion of us who are not on Facebook. And who here is connected on Twitter? Okay, a few of us. All right, great. How many of you have ever visited our website on the internet, uccgj.org? Okay, fair number of people. How many of you are on Snapchat? Great. Instagram? Yeah. Well, I find that social media is a place where I can feel really connected really quickly. For better or for worse, it's where people are at 24/7. There's always someone online doing something, and I can immediately go to my Facebook account and post something and know that someone's paying attention to me and caring for me. And a couple of years ago, I discovered, however, that sometimes that's not always the best thing in the world. I was scrolling through some of the things that are posted on my news feed. I know a lot of people do that. And I found something that was really interesting, caught my eye, so I clicked on it and led me to another website. And I was reading down that really fascinating, geeky kind of technological speak stuff. And I got to the bottom of the article and I clicked on another thing that seemed really interesting. And any of you have this experience where you read something and you get to the bottom and you click on the next thing and it leads you kind of down a rabbit hole? And you look up and you look at the clock and suddenly it's 3 hours later and you're like, oh my gosh, where did the time go? There's a term for that, and it's called clickbait, and it's little headlines that get you really interested, so you click on it and you get sucked into it and you kind of go down this rabbit hole. Well, I found this really cool thing about the movie Back to the Future. How many of you have seen Back to the Future with Marty McFly and his professor, and they go on a time machine back to the future, and they go back in time to Marty's past and meet his parents, and it's a wonderful movie. A couple of sequels there. Well, it came out right when I was a young boy, so we watched it a lot when I was a child. And this clickbait headline that I clicked on was about how today was the day. This was several years ago. Today was the day that Marty McFly and the professor went to the future, and that was happening that day. I was like, wow, that is so cool. So I decided I would share that. And I was like, hey, everyone, look. This great movie that was made in the 1980s, it's happening today. The event that happened in the movie is happening today. What a wonderful thing to celebrate. Well, it turned out that headline and that image was a photoshopped image. Someone online decided to alter the actual clip from the film and enter a new date, and it suddenly was making its way around online. In fact, it's happened 2 or 3 times on the internet. That's like, hey everyone, today is the day that Marty McFly flew to the future. Well, it's not true. Doc and Marty McFly traveled in their time machine car, not to the date that I thought it was, which happened to be June 27, 2012. In fact, it was a different date. It was October 21st, 2015. So this was younger me, and I thought I was being really cool by sharing some cool, neat piece of information. And quickly, people were posting on my shared link. They're like, actually, maybe you should do some research because it's not today. This is actually a false article. It's actually a couple years from now, and it's actually October 21st. So I remember the one guy who really tried to set me straight. He's now a professor of communications at University of Alabama. And so I think he knows what he's doing when he talks about researching something before you put it out there for the public to consume. He wasn't the only one who helped correct me. And I gotta say, if you ever posted something online and then been corrected, has that happened to some of you? Maybe? Yeah. It's not a good feeling when you feel like you did something that you thought was really cool and you shared it, and then people correct you on it. You're like, actually, that's not how it happened. This is how it happened. Actually, that's not the fact. Here's the fact. Well, as yucky as that feeling is, it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing that we have one another to help us learn and grow. And out of that experience, I learned that it's not okay to just randomly share a link that I think has some really cool information. It's important that I look up that information and double check the facts. Especially when we hear a lot in media and out in the news about this term that is called fake news or fake media, that sometimes we want to ask ourselves, in an era when you can make up any fact online, how do we ground ourselves in what is true and what is real? And that often happens on Facebook. So this is where the Facebook community can sometimes be really difficult, is that there's lots of false things that fly around really quickly, faster than we can fact check on the internet. The internet is not 100% truth. Don't believe everything you read online. Turn to someone else and ask some questions. Find yourself in a community where you can get some information and fact-checked. Fact-checking is actually a part of what I would like to call a liberal education. A liberal education is a term to describe the ways in which we learn about our world. Liberalism is a political idea that has been espoused from that to talk about the ways in which freedom of thought and freedom of expression is the highest valued gift in a culture. Liberal education talks about how it's important that we learn from multiple sources to get our facts straight, to say, well, this site says that Marty McFly flew back to the future in 2012. And this site is saying, well, actually, Marty McFly flew back to the future in 2015. It's important for me to look at those different resources, to have conversations with people, to find out the information, and discover what's really true. That is a part of the liberal education. Now, when I was in seminary, I was kind of shocked to discover a little bit more of the history of what liberal education means. Liberal education, liberal arts colleges, are institutions that are founded in a cross-section of humanities studies. So if you go to a liberal arts college, you would study not just sciences, or not just mechanics, or not just biology, but you would study in all these different realms of things. You would take a theater class, along with a philosophy class, along with psychology, and biology, and statistics, and you would take English, and you would use these varieties of educational genres to help inform you to become a more rounded person. And I think a more rounded person is a more healthy person. It also helps us become not just so egocentric centered to believe that we know everything, that my experience is the only experience, but learning about all these different areas of learning about the different writers and authors and books that are out there, we can really expand the way in which we understand our world, and that our view, our perspective, is just one of a vast number of perspectives out there. Liberal arts was really pushed in the 1920s, 1930s as a response to the Scopes monkey trial that happened. The Scopes monkey trial was a political debate about whether or not evolution was true or creationism was true. And in the United Church of Christ, we believe that you can stand firmly in both. You can understand the Bible talking about creation as a true story, and that evolution is a true story. And we see those as collaborative and not as conflictual. But back in the 1930s, there was a huge debate about whether or not God created the world or the world was founded by just some random collection of molecules that began an evolutionary process. Well, the Scopes monkey trial was really a clash between the ideas of the evangelical church and the liberal church. The evangelical church is actually relatively recent. The ideals of the evangelical church were founded in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And one of the premises of the evangelical Christian church is that the Bible is literal. And that literalism of the Bible led to this big battle of the Scopes monkey trial and the evolution of a liberal Christian church. The evangelical church evolved out of response to Charles Darwin's publication of the theory of evolution. He observed that things evolved and suggested a theory that this is how the world came to be. The way that we understand learning needs to come from multiple perspectives. I think that's an important thing to state. That if we just focus on just the Bible being the only source for us to understand who we are in this world and what we're supposed to be doing in this world, then we would be missing a lot of what else God has created. And I think that's where the United Church of Christ has really emphasized in its support of education and its broad perspectives on the way that we can be a diverse and beautiful church. You see, anyone can read a book. Anyone can learn a fact online and say, I know the truth, I have the truth. But it takes having that information and being in relationships with each other, being in communities of education, where you can ask questions, where you can come to a better understanding, share what you know, and give back to others, learn from others, and have conversations that actually equates to an education. See, we don't want to be just learners, we want to be educators. We want to be a people who are continually evolving in the way that we understand ourselves and God's work with us in this world. The way that we do this is by being a village that supports one another. Thankfully, this is what Christ calls us to. Christ invites us into this kind of learning community. In today's gospel message, Christ is talking to the disciples, and he's asked a question about how many times do we need to forgive one another before it's actually forgiven. And Jesus says, well, it's not once or twice, but it's 7. Indeed, it's 7 times 70. Jesus says that if someone sins, that you need to go talk to them and help them understand what kind of mistake that they may have made. And if they don't understand that, then to go to another person and come with them and sit down together and have a conversation, to learn, to grow. You see, being together helps us be stronger in the way that we learn and grow. There are lots of opportunities in which we can do this, and not all of them are going to be in person. Sometimes they're online in social media. Sometimes when we come across some sort of information, it's important that we don't automatically respond to that in a way that is self-centered and like feeling like I have the truth now and I can go share that. But it's about being in a process with taking information, being in conversations with people, learning more about that piece of information, evolving that piece of information into something that gets us closer to what it means to be the truth. A preacher, John Wesley, who was the founder of the Methodist movement, developed a system by which we can better understand what it means to learn. He created what is called the Wesleyan quadrilateral. And it's a phrase which means that we take 4 different perspectives to help us understand where the truth is in the world. And he said that it's based on 4 different emphases. The first one is Scripture. We go to the Bible, and we read in the Bible to find out what it is that is true. We go to tradition. What has been the tradition of the church? What has been the tradition of our culture and society to help us understand where truth lies? We use our reason. God gave us brains so that we could use them and not check them in at the door when we come to church, when we go out into the world. Let's use our reasoning to discover truth in this world. And fourth, that we have experiences that inform us about this world and what is true and real. So, getting back to the future, how do we find truth in a world that sometimes feels like truth is elusive, that there's fake truth out there or falsehoods? Well, we need to be in relationships with one another. We need to be encouraging one another to go deeper into the information that we have, to share the facts, to talk about the things that we are learning, and to not see that as the only truth, that's the perfected truth, but that truth is always being perfected. We are continually being challenged and shaped to be more thoughtful and more questioning. And that's one of the things that I appreciate about the United Church of Christ. That here in this church, we're encouraged to ask questions. To not feel like we need to have the answers, but to be on a journey with God that takes us deeper into the world and our experiences, our traditions, our truth, and our reasoning, that we might come to know for ourselves what it means to have truth. Being corrected online was a very humbling experience for me, but it taught me that I don't always have the truth, that I'm not always right. That is humbling, and it's an important experience. And so my encouragement for all of us is that as we go through each day, to not see that being corrected or being taught more information means that we're wrong, or that we're stupid, or that we're ignorant, but it means that we are actually taking that additional step towards learning more, becoming smarter, and becoming more well-rounded people, that we are encompassing more that liberation field that God wishes upon all of us. For God is a liberating God, who seeks for us to be freed from the power of sin, the power of misinformation, the power of falsehoods in our lives. So let us be in community together. May we all be gathered where 2 or more are, so that we might experience a good word from Christ. Amen. Let us